So if you're preparing yourself to take any of the Praxis PLTs, whether it's early childhood, elementary education, middle grades, or high school, you're going to want to navigate over to the ETS website and grab the study materials for this particular exam. So if you just Google ETS Praxis PLT, because ETS is the company that makes the test, right here after the ads, it'll pop up right here, this ets.org, and it'll take you to this particular site. Now, this one pulled up the PLT for grades K through 6, but if you just hit this menu bar right here and you scroll down, you'll see that there are 4 principles of learning and teaching. There's 5621, which is for early childhood. There's 5622, which is for K through 6, elementary school. Then there's 5623, which is 5 through 9 or middle school. And then there's 5624, which is high school. Now, these tests are virtually assessing the same concepts. They're just doing it at different grade levels. So all 4 of these study companions are going to benefit you no matter what test you're taking. So now it's time to figure out, well, what does my state even require? Does it require me to even take the PLT? So that's where this menu over here on the left-hand side comes in. This is the state requirements. So what I would do is grab this and then scroll down. I'm going to go ahead and grab Louisiana because we have a lot of people from Louisiana that watch our videos and stuff. So let me grab Louisiana, one of many. Lots of you are from different states, so I'm glad you're here regardless of what state you're from. And so if you just click this is Louisiana. And you can see that, let's just say I'm going to be an early childhood teacher. Well, you can see up here that everybody has to take the Praxis core in Louisiana, and we have videos on that another time. And let's say I'm going to be a pre-K3 teacher. I'm going to teach, pre-kindergarten. I have to take the principles of learning and teaching early childhood, and I have to do that at a 157. I have to get a 157 on that test. Notice that here's the test code 5621. Now, if I'm going to be a middle school teacher, obviously I still have to take the principles of learning and teaching, but I'm going to take grades 5 through 9, and I need to get a 160 on that exam. And then finally, if I am a high school teacher, I have to take, no matter what content area I teach, I'm going to have to take the principles of learning and teaching, grades 7 through 12. The test code is here, 5624, and I have to get a 157. So it ranges from about a 157 to a 160, and it doesn't matter which grade level you teach. Here's the elementary education, another 160. This is 5622. You're right around that range, 157 to 160 in terms of your score. So I would just shoot for a 160 because that seems to be the safe zone, 160, 161. We'll talk about scoring in another video, but I just want to break down the structure of these tests. All right, so let's say that I am a high school teacher in Louisiana and I am preparing for the Praxis Principles of Learning and Teaching, the PLT, grades 7 through 12. Well, that's going to be Praxis PLT 7 through 12, 5624. And when I click this, it'll pull up my test. And then there's this little PDF here, Study Companion. This is actually the most important document you can look at for this exam. It's more important than any study guide you could ever get. It's more important than any book, any course, anything that we make at NavaEd. This is where you start, okay? So when you click that, a PDF will pop up and you can download that to your computer. Now I've pulled all of them up here on my computer so you can see the different exams and how similar they are and also the differences among the 4. So let's take a look at this one. This is Principles of Learning and Teaching. This is 5621. This one here is 5622. This one here is 5623. And this one here is 5624. Now I want you to take a look at this piece here. It's got the pie chart and the breakdown of the questions. Notice that every single one of them is virtually the same. Let's take a look at 5621. Here it is. Notice that there are 70 selected response questions, and then you have these 4 main content areas: students as learners, instructional process, assessment, professional development, and then the last one is this analysis of instructional scenarios. I'm going to talk about that piece in a second. First, I want to focus on these first 4. These are all the main content categories that encompass the multiple choice section of the exam. And it's that way for all 4. So this one is early childhood. Let's take a look at elementary ed. Notice the same thing: students as learners, instructional process, assessment, and professional development, leadership and community. Same thing. The middle grades, same: students as learners, instructional process, assessment, and professional development community. And the same thing here. There it is, 4, 4, 4, and 4. And they all make up about 75% of the exam. Now, the last part of the test is the constructed response part of the test. And this is going to be 25% of your test, as you can see here. Now, notice that the constructed responses come from the 4 content categories here. Take a look underneath this Roman numeral 5. We have students as learners, instructional process, assessment, and professional development, leadership, and community. So the constructed responses are actually going to be a part of these 4. So getting to know these 4 very critical content categories is going to be very important in your success on the exam. Now, I'm going to go in further about the constructed response in just a minute when I break that down, but just know that every single grade level has a constructed response section, and it will be reflective of that grade level. So if you teach pre-K 3, you're going to have a constructed response that is more early childhood centered. If you teach elementary, it's going to be elementary centered. Middle will be a middle school scenario, and high school will be a high school scenario. However, I recommend that you get to know all of these because all of that information is going to help you on this exam. So while you do need to focus on your own grade level, all of these study companions and all of the questions and even all of the constructed responses, if you practice all of it, will help you on any grade level you're taking for the PLT. Okay, so now let's dig down just a little bit deeper and get into the content categories and see how much of the questions come from each one. So I zoomed in here. This is the middle grades PLT, and you can see I've got a breakdown of the content categories here. But notice over here that the bulk of the exam, 22.5 and 22.5 here, is coming from the first 2 content categories of the test. So that means that the majority of this particular exam is going to be on students as learners and the instructional process. Now, that doesn't mean you can neglect assessment and professional development, leadership in the community. It just means that most of the questions are going to come from content category 1 and content category 2. But still, I want you to have an understanding of all of that. Notice that that is the same way for every single one of these particular exams. Here it is here for the high school, same thing. Here it is here for the elementary, same thing. And here it is here for the pre-K or the early childhood, same thing. 22.5, 22.5, 15, and 15. Now, I want you to give yourself time on all of these content categories. It just helps to understand what questions are coming from where and where you should really focus your studies. Now notice that we have the 4 content categories here and the constructed response, number 5. And then if we scroll down in the document, we have something called test specifications. This is very, very important when studying for the exam. The test specifications outline specifically specifications of what is in the content categories outlined in the overall outline with that little pie chart. So as we dig down deeper, this is going to give us a sense of what's in each content category. So notice this is content category 1, students as learners, and then it's broken down into these very specified areas here. Now, each study guide, each study companion for each grade level has the same thing. Look, this one is for the pre-K 3, early childhood. This one, same thing, understands theoretical foundations all the way down. You've got your theorists here. This is for elementary. I believe this one is the high school one. They all have the same exact test specifications. So as we move through the specifications, we can see students as learners here. We can see instructional process here, content category 2. Then we can see, scroll down a little bit more. Where's content category 3? That was a big one. Assessment. And then content category 4, professional development, leadership, and community. These are all identical across all 4 levels of the PLT. So it doesn't matter what test you're taking, this part of the document is going to be the same. But what I love about this document is that you can essentially just go through and just hit each area. Notice that we have, this outline where we have the main categories here, but then we have all of these very specific things that they're talking about: body language, gesture, tone, stress, inflection. Making sure that you understand all of the things underneath these titles or these outlines is very important, and it makes for great study material. You can make, flashcards based on these particular concepts here. Now, if you really want to do well on this test, you start at the top of each content category. So let me start up here scroll down a little bit. Let's start here as students as learners. I want to make sure that I understand all of this. I want to make sure I understand everything, all of this. Now, it doesn't mean you get one test question per each individual thing, but understanding the overarching theme and what is going on in each one of these things will help you understand those scenario-based questions, which is the majority of the test. I'm going to go over that in just a second. So break down these test specifications, get in there and go through each bullet, each subcategory, each main heading, and just work your way through this document, getting to know those things. You can also drop these terms into Google. Just put them into Google and a definition will most likely pop up. Like self-determination, put that in Google. What does that mean? It'll pop up. Cognitive dissonance, put that in Google. Some of these terms, if you've never been a teacher before, you may not know these terms, or they might mean something else in another profession. So go ahead and grab these, and when you do, just put teaching or early childhood, and the right definition will come up. So that's a really great way to use this study companion. So once you've gotten to know the study companion and really dug down into those content categories and looked at all of the different, subcategories that are here, then I recommend you go down to the practice test. Now, I really love the ETS study companion practice test because ETS provides answer explanations, as you can see here. Answer explanations are really powerful tools because they help you understand why the answer was correct and why the other answers are incorrect. So there's really good information in the answer explanations. So don't skip over those. Even if you get the answer correct on the practice test, check out the answer explanations for sure. Now you can see up here that this particular PLT is for high school. And so you can see that this question here, number 3, is about high school. However, it doesn't matter because this is about English speakers of other languages, non-native speakers. So this is going to pertain to middle and elementary and pre-K. It's just made up from a high school scenario. But I recommend whether you're pre-K, elementary, or middle, you still do these practice questions. And I think the high school teachers who are looking at this particular PLT should go look at the middle school one, the elementary school one, and the pre-K 3 one, because there are really good scenario-based questions there that will help for all grade levels. So use all 4. The good thing about this is that you get essentially 4 practice tests when you're studying for the PLT free here from ETS, because all 4 of these practice tests will help you and all 4 of the answer explanations will help you. So don't limit yourself just to your grade level. Use all of them. All right, so now that we've gotten to know the blueprint, the test specifications, and the sample questions and answer explanations, I want to take a look at the constructed response. Now, this is the writing portion of the test. It's the short answer part of the exam. So notice this is section 5, and on every single grade level, whether it's early childhood, elementary ed, middle, or high, you're going to have a constructed response section. In this case, it's 25% of the exam, like all the others. And you can see that the questions will come from one of the 4 areas up at the top. Students as learners, instructional process, professional development, and you'll get questions based on those. Now, let's take a look at how this is structured. Now, there are 4 possible questions for the constructed response. So let's take a look at how it might be structured here. Notice that no matter what, you are going to get a constructed response from students as learners and the instructional process. Notice you get 1 to 2 questions from there and 1 to 2 questions from there. Now, you might not get one from assessment. You could get 2 questions from students as learners and 2 questions from instructional process here and not get any for assessment and not get any for professional development. Or you could get 1 from professional development, 1 from assessment, 1 from instructional process, and 1 from students as learners. It just depends on which test you get. But you will always get at least 1 from these 2 content categories here. All right. So it doesn't really matter. You're going to learn so much about these 4 content categories here that it doesn't really matter which constructed response you go through. You'll have an answer for those, especially if you go through our videos for the PLT. So you'll always have something to say no matter what constructed response you get. So now that we know how many questions come from the constructed responses, let's take a look at a sample constructed response. All right, so if we go over here, we can see that we have basically a case study here. And what they'll do is they'll give you this big, long, case study. It's going to have observation notes. It might have objectives, could have a scenario in here. It might even have students talking where each student is saying something and you have to kind of understand what's going on. Now, this is a huge thing to read here, and it's going to take you a minute to do so. But my suggestion to you is forget about this right at this second. What I would do is scroll down to your question. Always set the purpose of why you're doing this first. Your purpose is to answer question 18 here, and for this particular one, question 19. So there are 2 questions attached to this one case study. And so it's going to be very important that you read the question first. That sets the purpose and sets your task. That's going to help you on time. Because if you go up here and you start reading this case history here and you get lost in the language and then you go down and you read the question, okay, now you know what the task is, then you're going to have to go back up and reread for the purpose. Why not cut out that middle situation altogether? Go straight to the question first and figure out what the question is asking you to do. And that's where you're going to want to use your note paper that they give you, your pen and note paper to jot down notes very quickly. So let's take a look at what the questions say here. I'm going to jump right down here to question 18. Here it is. So we've got Ms. Mercer is concerned. We don't know what the constructed response is yet. I haven't read the case study. So what I want to do is go to these bullets here. This is the most important. Identify 2 specific actions Ms. Mercer might take to connect school and Sarah's home environment. Okay, we're trying to connect school and Sarah's home environment. That tells me that this question comes from the community content category. So let's go back and take a look at that. Right here, professional development, leadership, and community. Because you are connecting the student's home with the school, that's part of the community. So this particular test question is coming from that content category. And then underneath it, it says, for each action, explain how that action will benefit Sarah's learning. Well, now we're talking about Sarah's learning. So that part comes from the students as learners, because Sarah is the student and she is learning. So that's a good way to figure out how these questions are organized. Now, you don't want to do that on test day. You don't need to sit there and kind of analyze it. You just need to answer the question. But it always helps when you're studying to kind of look at this and understand that. All right, so we've got those. So I need to figure out how to connect Sarah's home to the learning environment. And the other thing is, how is that going to benefit her learning? And then I'm going to go to question 19, and I'm jotting little notes down. The other thing says, explain 2 additional purposes the mentor might suggest to Ms. Mercer that might motivate Sarah. So now we're talking about motivation. So I'm just going to write motivation. And for each purpose, explain how Ms. Mercer might modify instruction. Modify instruction to motivate. All right, I just want to keep that in mind. I don't need to write a whole dissertation before I start reading. Just keep in mind what's going on, because then as I start to read this case study here that's very, very long, I will have some information. I'll be able to just jot down a few things. And all you have to do is write a paragraph. So if you can get this information within the first couple of things you read here in the case study, then just do that. That's okay. You don't have to sit here for 8 hours and try to figure this out. Now, I'm not going to go through this case study with you. I would definitely recommend doing that in your study companion. But now that we know what is expected of us, now we can move here into the task and start to read the case study. Now, for this particular test and for this particular study companion, you only get 1 case study to look at and 2 questions. On test day, you're probably going to get 2 case studies and 2 questions each attached, because remember, it's going to be 4 total constructed responses. So you'll get 2 from 1 case study and 2 from another case study. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how this is scored. So we know that the multiple choice is A, B, C, or D, but with a writing task like this, the constructed response, you're going to be graded. Someone's going to be grading you. Someone's going to be, hand grading this. It's going to be a human being. So let's just take a look at how these are scored. You either get a 0, 1, or a 2 on these responses. So a 2 demonstrates thorough understanding. A 1 demonstrates basic understanding, and a 0 demonstrates a total misunderstanding, like you don't get it at all. On 1 question, you might get a 2. On 1 question, you might get a 1. You might float in between. That's okay. I would shoot between a 1 and a 2. It's okay to have a basic understanding, because guess what? You're a brand new teacher if you're taking this test, most of you. So it's okay to have a basic understanding because you're entering the profession. But shoot for a 1 or a 2 and stay away from the 0. Now, it's very important when you do a constructed response or any essay task that you take a look at the rubric of what they're looking for. So let's shoot for a 1 or a 2 and take a look at what they're looking for here. So the rubric for a score of a 2 says, demonstrates a thorough understanding and understands relevant aspects of the case and uses relevancy. This term relevant is very important. Responds appropriately to all parts of the question. When we look at the question, remember, look, this is question 19. There are 2 bullets here. You have to answer both in order to get a 2. So let me give you an example. You might explain 2 additional things the mentor can do here, but then you forget to say how these will help instruction or how these will help Sarah as a learner. And so you've only answered half the question. So make sure if you want to get this score of a 2, like we see here, you're going to have to answer both of those bullet points. So just make sure as you read, you make your checklist. Bullet point 1, addressed, check. Bullet point 2, check. Now we scroll down here, provides strong explanation when required, as well as supported by relevant evidence. Supported by relevant evidence basically means you go back into the case study and use that to support what you're saying. So you might say something like this: because Ms. Jones is trying to increase the daily objectives in terms of critical thinking, she might do X, Y, or Z. I kind of referenced what's going on in the case study in order to support what I'm trying to say. It's just kind of citing evidence within the case study to support. And then the 4th bullet says demonstrates a strong knowledge of pedagogical concepts, theories, facts, procedures, or methodologies. This is where, you're going to have to use your pedagogical kind of understanding, which is, do you understand teaching? Now, these are just big words for things like differentiated instruction, scaffolding, supporting all students, helping with intrinsic motivation, and all of those things we talk about in regards to this test. So that would help you get a 2 here in that area because all of those words are, the education words, the education practices that will help you get that good score there. Now let's take a look at a score of a 1. We have demonstrates basic understanding. We said that's not such a bad thing if you are a brand new teacher. Responds appropriately. Appropriate is good here. It's totally fine if you're responding appropriately. Provides a weak explanation. So maybe you kind of know what you're talking about, but your support is kind of weak. And then demonstrates some knowledge of pedagogical concepts. So maybe you know the basics of cooperative learning or group work, but you don't really understand how it can be used to enhance, student-centered learning environments or something like that. So you understand the main concept, but you just don't elaborate on it as much as you should have. And maybe you got a score of a 1 also because you only answered 1 bullet point. That would also probably bump you to a 1. So make sure you answer both bullet points and you already have a chance of getting that too. And then finally, a score of a 0 demonstrates a misunderstanding, meaning you didn't get what was said in the case study and you're saying something that just isn't true. Fails to respond appropriately, is not supported by relevant evidence, and demonstrates little knowledge of pedagogical concepts, theories, and facts. Okay, so probably not going to get a score of a 0. You're probably going to sit somewhere between a 1 and a 2 if you have, the basic understanding of what should be going on in a classroom. Now, one way to get better at this particular part of the exam, the constructed response, is to really take a look at the beginning part of this exam right here in the test specifications. All of these concepts here are related to the constructed response. Metacognition, look up here, schema, self-efficacy. All of that is going to be present in these case studies in the constructed responses. So if you can really get a handle on what's going on in these test specs and kind of be able to draw up your own scenario and understanding of them, you'll have no problem answering the constructed response for this exam. All right, so hopefully that cleared things up for you in terms of the structure of the test and the materials that you have available to you for the Praxis PLT. Remember, go to the ETS website, get your Praxis PLT study companion, and then download all the other grade levels too, and use their test questions, their constructed response, their answer explanations, and all of that, because it's essentially the same test It's just at different levels. And it doesn't matter if it's a pre-K scenario or a high school scenario. Metacognition is metacognition. Self-efficacy is self-efficacy. Motivation, all of that translates across content areas and up and down the grade levels. So right here, you have so much study information for free for most of the principles of learning and teaching for the Praxis exam.